Our next speaker is Haj Ahmad Thompson, will talk on the Hijrah. Haj Ahmad Thompson is barrister by profession, but he is more than a barrister, he is a scholar and has published many books on different topics and titles. I call upon Barrister Haj Thompson to come and shed light on the most stimulating event of the human history, Hijrah. Dr. Haj Ahmad Thompson.
Assalamu alaikum. Distinguished guests. It's a great honor to be here this evening. Every time that I come to a gathering at the centre, I have the same experience. I see familiar faces, often faces I haven't seen for a while. It's very good to meet again. I see new faces. I see faces from all over the world gathered together in one place. And it always reminds me of the words of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the best aspect of Islam is to greet those you know and those you don't know, and to feed the guest. And this is what happens here. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Ahmed Mahdoum, the new director here. It's not always an easy job. There's a lot of people to try and keep happy and to satisfy. But what I've seen over the years is that this is a place of study and a place of worship. It provides a great service for anyone who wants to come and do the prayer, and especially in Ramadan as well for people who need to break the fast. It's a very essential part of life in London. And all the people who come here I know are very grateful that, for the work that Dr. Hashim Mahdi has done to establish it and to look after it. It's always been his baby from day one, and he's looked after it and it's grown. And I'm sure that as long as there's a breath in his body and may he have a long life, he'll always keep an eye on it to make sure that everything's going as it should be. I've been asked just to say a few words about the Hijrah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The word Hijrah, the Arabic word, because Arabic is such a rich language that if you just look at a word and you look at its root meanings, and you find a wealth of knowledge straight away even before you look at any events which are associated with the word. And the word Hijrah, it means to separate yourself from. And it reminds you of the word also in Arabic Bara'ah, which is used in the context of Sidna Ibrahim, Prophet Abraham, when he said to his father who worshipped idols, Bara'ah, I'm free, I separate myself from what you're doing, because you're worshipping other than Allah, and I will not be associated with that. I will not associate anything with Allah. And this is the essence of the meaning of Hijrah, that you separate from something that you do not agree with. Now in the well-known hadith, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Hijrah is what you intend by it. So if you intend, if you make Hijrah, if you make a journey for Allah, in the way of Allah, that is your intention. If you make it for business, that is your intention. If you make it to go and marry a beautiful woman who's in another city, that is your intention. So in it is a very important intention. What is the intention when you make that journey? And of course, the example that all the Muslims are most aware of is the Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ from Mecca to Medina with Sayyidina Abu Bakr. And it's interesting because as the early history of the first Muslim community had formed around the Prophet ﷺ unfolded, there came a time when they said, where shall we measure time from? What event? Do we measure it from the season? Do we measure it from the first revelation? But I believe it was Sidna Umar who said, no, we will measure it from the Hijrah, from the time when the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr made that incredible journey from Mecca to Medina. Many of us have been to Mecca and to Medina. We've made that journey. And nowadays there's a nice dual carriageway and air-conditioned buses and air-conditioned taxis. It's a very easy journey, but when you look out of the window from your comfortable seat, you look at a very barren landscape, and you think, subhanAllah, how could they make that journey by camel, on foot, being pursued by people who wanted to finish them off. And you realize what an extraordinary journey it was, and also the kind of miracles that happened along the way. For example, they met one old woman who had a goat that had never produced milk, and the Rasul said, could we have some milk to drink? And she said, well, this is the only goat I have, it hasn't given milk for a year. So he said, well, let me milk the goat. And he began to milk the goat, and the milk came out abundantly, and they all drank from it. And the woman said, for as long as that goat lived, it never stopped producing lots and lots of milk. So this was the quality of the Hijrah, that it was surrounded in mercy and blessing and life. And even at that point, when the Prophet ﷺ had to leave Mecca secretly because he knew the Quraysh were planning to kill him, and he went to the cave with Abu Bakr in the night, and they took cover there. Yet even there was a sakina, there was a stillness, there was no anxiety, there was no fear for them. And Abu Bakr was a bit agitated because he had such a sensitive heart. And the Rasul said, don't worry, we're here, but Allah's here as well. And of course, even though they knew that, yet Abu Bakr took those precautions. He stopped up the holes where there might be scorpions or insects that might bite the Rasul, and he got bitten. But he made sure that the Rasul was protected. This was his love for the Rasul. And this is what the Rasul said about Sayyidina Abu Bakr. He said, Abu Bakr is above you all, not because of his actions, which were tremendous, but he said because of something which Allah has placed in his heart. And that was evidenced by, at the time of the Isra wal Miraj, when the Rasul told Sahaba what had happened. There were few then. This was before the Hijrah. And the Quraysh began to mock. And they came to Abu Bakr, they said, you know what Muhammad is saying now? And he said, if he says it, then it's true. He confirmed him, even though he hadn't experienced that journey himself. This was his quality, because he knew exactly who the Rasul was. And so the Rasul couldn't have had a better companion. And we see in those early days in the cave when they were just taking cover and lying low while everyone was searching for them. And Asma bint Abi Bakr was bringing them food, and then someone else was bringing their goats and sheep to cover the track so no one would suspect where they were hiding. But when the Quraysh came to look at the cave, they saw that a spider had spun a web across the mouth of the cave, and that a dove had laid her eggs in a nest in a little bush by the mouth of the cave. And they said, well, no one can be here, because otherwise there wouldn't be eggs in the nest, and there wouldn't be a cobweb over the cave. Allah protected them completely. And I remember, in fact, quite recently when I moved flat, we moved flat from South London into Central London, and our flat has a little balcony, and in the balcony a pigeon had laid 2 eggs, and it reminded me immediately of the Hijrah, and I thought, well, inshallah, we are in a protected place here. This is like a sign from Allah for us. I said, we're in a protected place here. If anyone doesn't like us, we will be protected, inshallah. When we look at the meaning, what is the meaning of the Hijrah? Because the meaning is you can have an event, but you have to see the meaning. T.S. Eliot, in one of his plays, he said, we had the experience, but we missed the meaning. And for Muslims, they seek always meaning. What is the meaning of what is happening? What is the meaning? Even in what is happening in Gaza, what is the meaning? And we know because it's in the books of Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. It's in their own book. It tells of this time. It tells of the people of Gog and Magog. It tells of the 13th tribe. They're not Bani Israel. They're not Semitic. They're Turkic. They are not Jews. They are the people of Gog and Magog who have come from the far country in the north between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And all of this is foretold in Ezekiel. It's confirmed also in the prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad. And therefore we know the outcome of this conflict which is raging at the moment. We already know what will happen. And although our hearts are touched by the suffering, by the sheer inhumanity of this kind of cynical killing of women and children and destruction of not only buildings but even olive groves, all the things which are forbidden to Muslims, we know that in the end there will be a just outcome, and this will be stamped, if you like, when Sayyidina Isa returns, when Jesus returns, and justice and peace are established in the world, as Dr. Mahdi prayed earlier on. this is the meaning of what is happening there. And I just mentioned it because it's been mentioned already, and it's part of what is happening. It's the backdrop, if you like, of this gathering tonight. But what is the meaning of Hijrah? And the meaning of Hijrah is moving from the impossible to the possible. Because the situation in Makkah in the early years when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is receiving the revelation from Allah, someone who is illiterate, someone who couldn't read or write, someone who had never been to any school or university, and yet he was being given revelation in a pure Arabic, which was so pure that some people became Muslim just on the strength of the language. They said this couldn't have been written by a human being. And also they noted that it was a different style of Arabic to the Arabic which the Prophet spoke in his everyday life. So what he said and what he spoke was a different Arabic to the revelation of the Quran. And the power structure at that time of the Quraysh felt threatened. They said, everyone might stop following him and stop following us. They might start following him and stop following us. So they wanted to get rid of him. They saw him as a threat, not as a blessing, which he was and is. He was a blessing to all of the world. But they perceived him as a threat because they wanted control and they wanted power. And they didn't realize that all power is from Allah. They didn't realize La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And this was why they wanted to kill him. This is why they plotted to kill him. And they got to the point where they were about to kill him. So the Rasul had to ask Sayyidina Ali to actually sleep in his bed that night so that he could just leave. And he walked straight past the people who were planning to kill him. He walked straight through them. And Allah hid their vision so they couldn't see him. And then he went with Abu Bakr to the cave. And they had reached a point where it was impossible for them to continue to remain in Makkah. And therefore and at the same time people had come to them from Medina, which was then called Yathrib, and given them their pledge of allegiance. They said, we are with you. You have our complete support. We will protect you. We will look after you. And so he moved to these people. Sayyidina Umar once said to someone, what is the difference between the people of Mecca and the people of Medina? And the man didn't want to answer. He asked him 3 times. And he said, I'll tell you the difference. He said, the people of Mecca chucked him out, and the people of Medina welcomed him in. He said, that's the difference. What a difference it is. And when he arrived in Medina, he was welcome. And in Medina, life was possible. It was possible to establish the deen of Islam. It's a social aspect of Islam. The early revelations in Mecca are all about Allah and about His creation and about His complete power over the world and the universe and this world and the next world. These mighty metacosmic realities that surround all of us. But in Medina unfolded the social aspect of Islam. How do people live together as a community? How do they conduct their relations? How do you treat the old people and the young people, your wives, your children, your relatives, your friends? How do you deal with enemies who try to destroy you? All of this was unfolded. And also the further acts of ibadah were established. The fasting of Ramadan and the pilgrimage to Mecca. The whole deen was completed in Medina, and then Allah brought the Prophet back to Mecca. And we have this extraordinary re-entry of Mecca, the conquest of Mecca, when the Prophet ﷺ entered at the head of 10,000 Muslims. And look what happened. There was no recrimination, there was no revenge, there was no negative feeling. Even Abu Sufyan, who had been fighting the Prophet all the time, was honored because he was the leader of the Quraysh. And once he had given his allegiance to the Prophet, and he said, he gave him a position. He didn't degrade him. He said, anyone who goes to the house of Abu Sufyan has my protection. So he offered a very generous. He dealt with people very generously. And this is why in the end everyone entered Islam. Because what was true became apparent from what was false. It was as simple as that. So what he had separated himself from became nothing. There was a time when the kufr and the idol worship and the rejection of the Quraysh in Mecca was too much. And so he had to separate from it. But then he came back and he transformed the situation. This is the meaning of Hijrah. And this is why this Hijrah of the Prophet is so important for the Muslims. It has so many lessons in it for us and so much teaching for us. It tells us, you find yourself in an impossible situation, the earth is wide, move. The earth is wide. Allah gives you opportunities everywhere. so many of us have made Hijrah in some way or another in our lives. Look at Dr. Pasha. I remember last year he was saying, I'm thinking, should I go back to India or should I go to Medina? I said, Dr. Pasha, you made Hijrah to London. This is your patch. You have taken up residence here. You have been fighting all your life to establish truth and to remove ignorance and to help the Muslim community. You're not allowed to go. This is the reality. This is Dr. Pasha's Hijrah. We all have Hijrah.
Dr. Pasha is the same post of Islam in India.
Yes, absolutely. And for people like myself, we make Hijrah from ignorance to knowledge. We grow up with an education which is incomplete. And I remember, I said, I don't know, I don't understand life. I don't want to live my life and then die in ignorance. I have to find out what it's about. And finally, when I met Muslims who were knowledgeable Muslims, I said, these people know something I was never taught at school. These people have illumination I've never met in other people. These people have courtesy I've never seen in other people. I want it. And so Allah made me make Hijrah from dhulumat ila nur. He made me make Hijrah from ignorance to knowledge. And this is just a natural process. It's in the heart of everyone, this desire for knowledge. And this is something that this centre facilitates. People, its main objects are educational and worship. And so I think with those few comments I'll stop speaking, because Hijrah is something you can speak about forever.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.